What's up, guys? It's Ace Coleman, and today I have Christian Clark on, and we have got so many things we're going to talk about. So, Christian, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a 2-year shooter. I shoot competitive archery. I hunt a little bit. I fish. I love a lot of stuff about the outdoors. And I'm currently going from shooter of the year in the amateur K50 class to known pro next year. I'm going to be shooting all pro indoor events and yeah, just full blown, jumping into it as a career.
Awesome, man. Tell us a little bit about your season.
So yeah, I went to Rushmore Rumble. I'd been shooting really well, showed up there, shot great. I finished second behind Zach Plonsky by 1 point, and then went to Iowa and shot the Iowa Pro-Am. Finished behind Zach Plonsky in second with 687 because it's a 690 tournament. And yeah, and I tied for second and won a shoot off. It went well. Again behind Zach Plonsky, and then went to Lancaster, shot great, made the top 16, and then lost in the last match. Last arrow, just missed it, and the nerves got me there. That was a whole different format. Shooting against head to heads, never done that. Went to Vegas, shot really well, shot a 900 with I think it was either 84x because I missed four, then two, then two. So 84x 900. Went to Foley, shot really well. Probably one of my best, most forgetting weekends of shooting ever. Shot really well. Foley of one. Went to Indoor Nationals, won. And then Fort Benning and Camp Minden, Louisiana, I had some struggles there and couldn't get it done. But then I came back strong at London, finished third in K50, finished third in Metropolis. And then I won the ASA Classic with 55 up. I shot a five.
Oh, yeah.
And then won shooter of the year as well. Tied Aaron for score and then won on like 20 bonus rings. I shot a lot of fives this year. Way too many fives and eights. Aaron Shaw. Aaron Shaw got second.
Oh,
He's
yes.
also, and that's cool too. He lives about 20 minutes away from me. So we
Yeah.
travel like all the way around the nation and then wind up, shooting against this, like us two battling it out for the same spot. And we could have just done this at home. It's like, come on, guys, why do we got to drive all the way just to compete that hard against each other? So yeah, he's a great shot. Just edged him out on bonus rings on that one. That was a lucky win. That was a crazy weekend with the rain and at the Classic. But
Yeah.
yeah, then this year, just going pro, going to Nimes is a tournament that I'm going to add. I'm going to go to France, but everything else is the same. Yeah, I think just Nimes is going to add on the list. So
Yeah. When is Names?
Nimes will be the weekend before Lancaster. So I'll be running to
Okay.
Rushmore Rumble first, and then Iowa Pro-Am, and then come back home, and then fly out to Nimes, shoot at that one, fly to Lancaster, fly to Vegas, fly back home. So it'll be a
Perfect.
busy couple weeks there.
Bouncing.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how you got started into archery.
Yeah, so that's really cool. It's kind of a funny joke now, but I always wanted to be an Indian when I was a little kid, like really little kid, and like shoot how they did in buffalo hunt. I don't know what it was. I was obsessed with Indians and like Native Americans and how they could make a bow and go shoot it. So I'd go out and I'd cut a little tree down like the size of my arm and bend it over and then tie a hay bale twine around both ends, and I'd shoot that all afternoon till it broke. And then the next day they go make another one, and then doing that I just kind of wanted to do it. And eventually my grandpa or my dad, one of the two, bought me my first bow. I shot that bow for, I want to say like 10 years, and I got good with it. And, I kind of took a break from shooting that much and trying to get really good. So my dad was a really good shot. I wanted to be as good as my dad. And I wanted to be like Levi Morgan. Whenever I got into watching competitive archery, I was just on YouTube one day and I saw an ASA shoot down from whenever. It was actually the 2011 World 3D Championships where Levi Morgan
Yeah.
and Jamie Jameson were going back and forth. That was the video that got me into archery. I've told Levi that every time I see him. I'm like, remember that time when you and Jamie Jameson were going back and forth? That got me into archery. And that's really cool. He's like, dude, you've told me this 4 times now. But
Dude, I know
I know
that same
I'm sure I get
video.
annoying at some point, but it's so cool.
Yeah.
Like, dude, that's where it started. Like literally. So I saw that and I'm like, I want to do that. I want to be that guy right there. And then I was watching him. I didn't even know what Open Pro, or I think they just had Open Pro, but like I didn't know what Open Pro or Senior Pro and all that was. And I just kind of figured it out. I thought Open meant like a freestyle setup, but it really means that you're judging the targets. And I'm like, oh, so these guys don't know the rangefinders, because the commentary is like, they always say these guys don't know the yardage. They have to judge it and estimate it and then put a good shot. And they're close enough within a 1-inch ring that, they hit it a lot of times. So I wanted to be like Levi. I started judging a lot and got good at that, really good at that. And then kind of took a turn and played more baseball. I wanted to do that as well. And then that didn't work out. and I was like, I want to be good at archery again. So I went and bought another bow, a better, way nicer bow. That was really, really whenever I started getting serious about like shooting more and shooting with my friends and not just me and my dad thing. I got a few friends into archery, and like when we started hunting and doing that, and I didn't hunt that much. I actually didn't hunt till I was 16, but I ran and I just shot, and I was a good, really good shot. Like out of all of us, really good. And then went to see, that was when I bought that one. So then I went to actually a bow shop and I bought my first flagship bow. So the first one I bought was it was a 2018 or 2017 Clash. I think, yeah, Hoyt Clash. And so I shot that thing so much that I was like, I know I'm better than this. So then I went and bought my first flagship bow, and I shot that thing for 8 months. And then somebody was like, hey, you should get into doing this target thing. Like, you're good at this. And I'm like, that's a thing. Like, I thought like for some reason you had to already be a pro or, have parents that were into it. And it kind of seemed like an unattainable thing for a while, but then just shovel out the money and, buy a bow. And then next thing you know, you're fully in it and you're doing it. And then you get more equipment and things are running and you do good at it when you work hard at it. So I just loved it so much. That was watching it through your sights go and hit the middle. I think that's probably the one thing that I'm like, that's what you love when it feels
crazy.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a dopamine rush when like you're like, shot goes off and you just watch the knock. That's the coolest stuff.
What are some mentors that you've had that have helped you get to the level you are at today?
When I started shooting for elite archery, I didn't have a lot of, I don't know, bow brands to run around with. So I wanted to find something cheap that I could do it. And elite was being the, I guess, most cost efficient way to get into it. They're not a cheap bow by any means. All the bows are really great. But as far as the other ones, the result was $1,600, and that was the money that I had, and I bought that. And it actually took me selling about everything that I had archery wise on Facebook. And I finally paid off that bow. And then I slowly bought back more stuff. And then I had a friend get me in contact with Daniel Matthews when he was an elite rep. And yeah, I texted Daniel. He got me on dealer staff. And that was the last week that Daniel was working for Elite. And he went to work for another company, I think. And then I had Nathan Brooks reached out. And then Nathan helped me a lot. I randomly asked him questions. And that was really cool too, because I was just piddling around one day. And next thing you know, Nathan Brooks texted me. He said, hey, hi, Christian. This is Nathan Brooks. And I started freaking out. I'm like, I know who this guy is. He's like one of the legends, like one of the greatest of all time, 3D archers. Incredible resume on that guy. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I think that's what I texted him. I said, no way. I was like, that's so cool. But yeah, he texted me. I've learned a lot from him. And I actually got a job at an archery range that we have. It's run through the city. It's called the Springfield Archery Complex. And we have a club there called Ozarks Target Archers. And I get to shoot there. And my boss, Amy, has helped me a lot with, getting into competing and kind of not necessarily shooting skill, but the other things apart from the physical archery. So like not shooting as much and not equipment work as much, but the mental shooting and the mental side of shooting, and also just steering me in the right direction to be more like a people's pro. A lot of us really don't like some pros that will not necessarily be too nice, you could say sometimes. And, everybody's their own person. Everybody's going through stuff, but there's definitely been times where it's like, oh, that was kind of rude. Like I was a fan of you, bro. But so yeah, she's really careful about me, like what I do, what I say, and people are watching you. So she taught me those lessons that you might learn later on down the road really early. I still struggle with that, but just with every good thing, there's bad things that come along. Like we were talking about earlier, if you're shooting really well, sometimes like on Isaac's podcast, he's like, he shot really well. And all of a sudden people maybe weren't as nice to him. That's kind of how it might be if from the other end. So she was kind of making me not do that. Not that I was doing that, but I kind of, I had her help to make sure that I didn't go down that path of, maybe being rude or saying stuff. And a lot of it was just that people are watching you. That Amy is a huge help. From there, I got in contact with Nathan Brooks and then Darren Christianberry. Darren's been awesome help working with Elite, helping me get equipment, I guess, tuned how it's like designed to be tuned. So like instead of on almost every bow, instead of moving the rest, how you can move the cams or you can tilt the limb pockets or they have their own tuning stuff. So I was doing a lot of stuff not like how they're designed to be done. Equipment wise, Nathan and Darren have been a huge help. Shooting wise, it's just a lot of practice. You can't tell someone how to shoot good and they shoot good. You just got to do it. And I've worked with some mental coaches, sport performance coaching. That's been a big help, I think, as far as high pressure shooting in practice. I think that helped a lot, because then going to a tournament, if you can shoot that score and you still shoot that score, that's what's hard for a lot of people, is going to where it matters and then shooting that score. So,
dude, having a network of people is just so important. And yeah, it sounds like Nathan's definitely been a great resource to you. He's a really nice guy, one of the nicest guys I've ever met.
He's incredible, great person.
Yeah, and like every time, like I see him, he looks at me, and I look at him. We lock eyes, and I'm like, "What's up?" Like with my eyes, and he's like,
"Yeah,
what's up?" Yeah,
he was
a really great guy.
In a way. Yeah, he was a major. I can't even think of like all the stuff I've been like, "Hey, can I call you real quick?" And it'd be like 11 o'clock at night, and I'm like, "Why is he?" And he'll say, "Yeah, sure," or something, and I'm like, "Oh, that's so fun." I'm like, "Dude, why are you in bed?" I'm like, "Why did you get a phone call? Why are you talking to me?"
Yeah, like, isn't your time more valuable? But he's just giving back, I think.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. That's what you see too. A lot of guys that will go from, just shooting and dominating there to shooting and giving back like that. And those are the people's pros. Those are the people that, it's like when you have nothing but good things to say, that's kind of what Amy, to touch on earlier, that's kind of what she was like. She's like, you don't want to give people reasons to not like you, whether or not you did bad things or rubbed somebody in the wrong way. You don't want them to be able to think that. You want everybody across the board, like Nathan, you won't ever hear anything bad about him because he's just that great of a dude. So being like is a huge help.
When it comes to you, what do you do that a lot of archers probably don't look at or do that makes you shine the most with your shot?
Okay, so something that a lot of archers don't do is, I think every time whenever I'm shooting and something ain't going right, and the problem keeps happening. Like I say, I keep shooting out the bottom. It's like, it's not me. A lot of guys would be like, oh, it's me, not the bow. And yeah, that's true. Like a bow is going to do the same thing every time. But if you can get it to where it doesn't do that, why wouldn't you do that? So every time that I'm shooting, and if something isn't going right, I'm always trying to, find the perfect puzzle piece meshed together for my equipment and myself to line up together. And some guys will say that it's best to shoot your shot and have the equipment adjusted to you. And other guys that will say that good shooters should be able to pick up any bow and shoot it well. Yeah, shoot it well, but the level that it takes shooting that, when you have millimeters, if you've seen some targets that are out, like for the Vegas shoot off, that's thousands and thousands of dollars. So, and that millimeter, I guarantee you, was a mistake that was more than a millimeter earlier on before they'd been fixing those issues. And a lot of times if your miss is something that would happen a lot in practice, like last year, I always kept having a high left miss, and it's just because I'd be aiming and I just pushed out the top as I fired it. And that was something that I struggled with, and I got it really, really good. And then when I was out in the Vegas shoot off, it's exactly what I did. Just wasn't paying attention, and I let it happen again. So it's like, but that miss would have been a 9 or worse had I not mitigated that miss throughout my practice. So I think changing the equipment to you, that's how it makes it forgiving too. Like I talk about, you have a bow that you can shoot pretty much anywhere in the yellow sometimes, and it just hits. It just works. Well, to achieve that, you can't have a bow out of the box that's not been messed with, that doesn't fit you. Now, sometimes, like I said, you get a bow out of the box and you put it together and it's just magical. It just works. But when you don't have that, and you don't have that luck, that 1 in 1,000 bow, then, you can't just keep shooting it and blame yourself. It's like, you gotta change stuff. And another thing is I don't shoot a whole lot of arrows. So this year it's been a big part of my practice schedule to just shoot hours, 7 or 8 hours in one day sometimes. And that's how you achieve the numbers of arrows. So like most of my practices are really dense and short, shoot for less than an hour and probably get 60 to 90 arrows downrange and shoot, good scores. So the density of your practice, I think, can change how many arrows you shoot or don't shoot. So
yeah, I would agree 100%. Like I feel like there's a level of fatigue, and then like that can be a good thing, because like if you're super fatigued, you can pick out some things in your shot that you don't normally have when you're not fatigued. I mean, but sometimes whenever you fix a bow when you're fatigued and then you go back, you might have like a form shift where it's like, oh, I want to move it back where it was or something like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, as far as changing the bow to fix the problem, that is huge. I feel like to get really good, like as an amateur for sure, what people do is they start learning how to change the bow. They just experiment with everything. They play with
Right.
everything under the sun. I feel like that's
Right.
true. And then you might agree with this. As a pro, I think every pro has already done that, but they just have to keep doing that. They have to keep
Mhm.
fiddling with things just to get that little extra bit.
And to touch up on that too is like I always tell people so many times that if you can change your setup and gain points, those are points that are already on the table that you're not missing as a shooter. That it's and I call them setup points. So like if, for example, if somebody comes in and their bow is like so out of tune that even shooting an arrow with veins, it's sticking in the target all sort of directions every time, and
Sure.
it's like you don't realize that if you were to just simply shoot it through paper and get a better bullet hole, then setup points wise, your groups are going to be tighter. So I call those setup points. Like if I
Yeah.
if I get a bow that's so forgiving that I'm still the same shooter regardless, but if I get one that's so forgiving that you can shoot it anywhere and it's going to hit the middle, and then you've gained maximum setup points on that. But yeah, and I think there was another thing too that you said that made me want to think about it, but that might have been it. That might have been the setup points thing.
Yeah. Yeah, just basically the whole idea, just play with your bow. Like there's this person that I practice with a lot, and she will just be very hesitant to change anything. And
Mhm.
I-
Oh, so
I'll I
so
just tell her
often.
try it, and if you don't like it, go back. But you need to
Yeah,
try it. You need to
and
learn
that's
to grow.
yeah, like that's a huge thing too. Is if you look at the pros across the board, I wouldn't say all of them, but as close as you can get to all of them do their own bow work. They
Mm,
know what to how to diagnose those issues and what to change. And sometimes you just have a hunch that maybe you're dropping your arm or what it might be that you're not seeing, but it's happening. You can feel it. But there's also
yeah,
other stuff like if your bow's aiming too fast, you might add weight or change your stabilizers or your peep height or D loop. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. And then the feel of it, whenever those things are going bad, like say if my bow's aiming like this, then the feel of it with your D loop or if your peep or your stabilizers, you kind of know what it is. So like watching it,
right,
one thing, like watching it through, I use the steady aim. So watching it, you can see the issue, but it doesn't see it internally to what you feel. So if you were to feel it and you feel like your D loop, something's just weird. It's like here. Well, you know that it's probably your D loop height, or it could be limb tiller. I personally haven't limb tillered ever. I just set the limb deflections kind of how they say to set it. That's one thing I don't. But so like the amount of pros are that are doing all their own stuff are the ones that are really achieving it. So like if you are afraid to touch your stuff, and I kind of see it from both ways. So like there's a bow shop that you might go into and everybody that walks in there is like, yeah, man, I was messing with my rest the other day. And we're always like, why are you touching your stuff? Like you don't know what you're doing. So there's it's a double-edged sword where if you know what you're doing and you know how to fix it and you have the knowledge, then why wouldn't you? Or,
sure,
accessing that knowledge on tuning your stuff is not really even tuning, but just matching it to how you shoot really well is a huge advantage. Like the best archers out there, I think, are also extremely good bow mechanics. So like,
for sure.
look at Paige Pierce and how good she can get that bow to shoot. Hers bows are the way she explains it. It sounds like it's just as forgiving. Where sometimes you just have a setup that when it fires, you don't care. It's always going to be in the middle. And
Right. That's
and then getting it to
nice.
aim good is another good one. So it's like being that good of a bow mechanic, I think, is a huge part. Or like I'll talk to sometimes we like run, I don't know, we have a Joed club or a youth archery club. So we'll have kids coming in, they're like, yeah, it's been, this has been happening for like 6 months. It's been shooting like this. It's like, why didn't you tell us sooner? We could have changed, we could have, done something. Or like we'll look at their, I don't know, their what it may be, like their veins are contacting their rest so bad. I think just like they don't understand that. They just know that to just shoot it, but they don't understand that I don't know, that you can move equipment, and it kind of scales too with what you have. Like if you get set up with a very, very basic, like ready to shoot kind of package, there's
Right.
like limited stuff that you can do, but you can do a little bit. And then especially like draw length and draw weight, stuff like that. But I think that knowing what to do to your bow is a huge, huge impact. And then you get to the really, really, really highest percentile of archers, like you look at Kyle or Paige or Tim or I don't know, Bodie, you'll see that they'll make the tiniest little change and then instantly they'll be gaining 3 or 4 X's. Or, like I need to add a third of an ounce here. And they do that. And it's like they go from like shooting all over the 9 sometimes. And it's just middle, it's like the smallest little change, not that the smallest little change affects them, but it makes it so much easier to shoot that. Cause like good archers, again, will shoot good with whatever equipment they have, but making that little change and knowing what to change, it's so much more efficient. And that's where you get the highest elite level of shooters that are, able to do that.
Dude. That's exactly right. I know that Jesse is notorious for having like an ounce on his front bar. So yeah, I wonder how he'd shoot if we took that ounce off. Probably has like internal.
Dude, it's on there for a reason. I'd say it's probably on there for a reason. I'm sure he has. Yeah.
Anyway, as far as like if you were getting a bow out of the box, just getting it ready to shoot a tournament, what would you do?
I would. So getting from out of the box to a tournament, are we talking I already have had one of these bows in my hands for a year, or is it new release?
Brand new.
Okay, new release day. I would probably, since they're coming from Elite, then whatever your manufacturer may be. But if mine are coming in and I've shot similar bows, they don't make huge changes a lot of times. It's stuff here and there that are, make all the difference. But it's like a very similar riser right in the middle of the riser or something. So I'll take a postcard and I'll measure. I have an arrow square. So you clip it in the bottom edge of the arrow square will show you like where the center of your arrow is. So I'll put that right in the middle of my D loop. I actually put a knock in it. And with the biter knocks, they have a seam in the middle. And I'll line that up with the seam and then mark the bottom of that arrow square, take an index card on the shelf, mark where that mark is, put that on my new bow, mark that, put the arrow square. So I start with the D loop where I've had it before, start where I left off. From there, I actually like to, and you don't need to do this. Nobody needs to do this, but I think I'm talking way back in the day. And this is just how many videos I've seen on YouTube from when I started. An old Bow Junkie Chance Bowbeff Bow Junkie video. It was like 2013 or 2014. He was showing how he sets up his bows and he'll take the axles out, take the limbs off, and then re-grease the limb pockets and put them all back in. I just started doing that just randomly. I'm like, I'm going to try that. Have I noticed a difference? No. They're the same it's the same exact thing that you started with, but just because Chance did it, I'm like, oh, sure, try that. Exactly like you said. Hey, try something. And, if you like it, then great. And then, so I'll put some grease on the limb pockets. I'll put the limbs to where, so if I'm holding a right-handed bow in my left hand, the top left limb on the driver's side of the bow is the stiffest limb deflection. And then the next stiffest right below it. And then on the passenger side, it's the next stiffest and then the weakest limb on the bottom.
Right.
And I think that doing that just gets it the best spread around. And that's not the way to run it, but that's another thing Nathan Brooks said, hey, try this. And I tried it and it felt more balanced versus, I don't know if they come from the factory in a certain order. I think they're honestly just kind of match graded like arrows are. And then they'll pick 4 of them out of the same bin or something. I can't really say how it is. I don't know, but that's how I could imagine it. Like for example, 70-pound limbs, I think around 124 or 126 limb deflection on mine. And the 60s are like 107 to 111 maybe, or 114 maybe. So like they'll kind of put them in different bins. But yeah, they grab 4, put them on there. Whether they orient them or not, I reorient mine. Then I'll clip the hamski on the bottom. I use the limb clamp. It's kind of an odd deal. So, and that goes in my hamski timing. I take the spring out of the limb clamp where it's just the limb clamp and I clip that on my limb bear and actually tie the cord to that and then run it up. And I like to run the spring on the top of my hamski, and I'll get into that here in a minute. So put that on there first. After that, I bolt everything on the hamski, put new string. When I'm putting the limbs back in, I put the new strings on, obviously gas bow strings. And I'll put the hamski on, put the rest on or the sight on, mount my stabilizer brackets on there. And then I usually just throw bars on it just so it looks better. It looks cooler when you're sitting there looking at it. You're like, that looks awesome.
Looks like a bow.
yeah, it looks like a bow now. Exactly. We have I don't know if you've had them, but the LTR, the roller guards. I slide those all the way out on pretty much every bow just to get maximum clearance. And doing that creates a major left tear for me always, every time out of the box. I'm like, I get the bow. And I'm already going to mess with the limb pockets for a left tear because I know it. And then I usually shoot it, and then it's pretty close, but still left. And that's one thing I've been playing with too is with the shims and the cams. I didn't think you were really supposed to change them, but I tried it, and then I moved the cams to the left, and that changed the left tear. well, so that now I can have my limb pockets in the center, but my cams are just shifted over. So then you have the maximum left and right. Do you really need it? No, you're never going to touch it again until you retune your bow. And every week or so, I'll just shoot a bear shaft and make sure it's good, or where it was. Yeah, rest on the limb. I like to run my limb clamp as far back as it can go, but the limb is thin and then it gets thick at the end. So you have to run it before it gets thick or all the way back on where it's thick. You can't run it on like the slope. So I put it at the bottom of the slope, where it's the thin part. And yeah, do that. I put a peep in the bow before I even tie my D-loop, but I'll have my knock sets on there. And then my D-loops, I found what I like best is 11 millimeters, so that when I get shooting it, it'll stretch out to about 12, but I cinch them down pretty tight. So it's probably not even 12 yet on my current bow.
That sounds like a very short D-loop.
It's pretty short. It's about, I can't even stick my pinky through it, but I like that because I was talking earlier, like a long one, any movement here and like your whole bow. I feel like if you were holding it with a long D-loop, your whole bow can pivot on a whole other axis. But with a shorter one, it's obviously going to be more stable. Now, like your release angle might play a factor, but I test all that stuff. I'm like, I'll shoot it and I'll like turn my release like sideways almost and shoot it, and it hasn't affected me yet. So do that, and then I'll set my draw length. And on the mods right now, I know about the valley that I like. So here's something unique that I do that maybe not a lot of guys do is I'll just move so we have our mods that rotate, right? And they have a stop on the mods where the cable would touch here on the stop, and that stop on here mod will actually come out of the mod and in, so that you can adjust your valley, which changes your holding weight. I get the valley that I like and then use the limb bolts to change holding weight if holding weight's odd. So like my peak weight isn't that important, even in known archery, like speed, it's whatever, however it shoots best. But yeah, getting a holding weight, it's really, if it isn't an issue until it was an issue. Like if I wind up with a lot of pounds, like say a lot of holding weight would be like 20 pounds. I'm just kidding. That's not a lot. But like for me, it would be. But with 20 pounds, when I'm sitting here, I'm aiming it and it wants to come forward a little bit, then my valley wouldn't have been deep enough, or the holding weight's too much. So like now that I figure out the valley, I know it's the holding weight, and I'll play the limb pockets. So, or the limb bolts. And then from arrows, I think a big part of the arrows thing, I know people say that this is not how they do it, especially shooting gold tip. They'll cut them super short. Not to name any names, but Tim tells you cut them extremely short, right? Yes. The rest, Kyle does it, Tim does it, and it's great for them. Like they're phenomenal with it. But I tried it and I just really didn't click with it that well. So then what I like to do is put my estimated point weight in there. So like indoor arrows, I'll probably put in about 160, 170 grains around what I'll shoot. At the lightest, maybe 150. And I'll put that in there, and I'll put a knock and a bushing in there. And then you tap the arrow on a corner so you find that sweet spot like a baseball bat. And that's your node, like where it supposedly flexes around that point. So like if I were to draw a straight line like here, and then you take that straight line and bend it, the ends are going to go low, the middle is going to go high, and the end is going to go low. Well, you want to find that node where when it bends, this part's going low, so you want the rest right on it or behind it, where because when that arrow bends like this, your arrow's gonna be going like down on the rest, and then or so if it's in front of it, your arrow's gonna be going down on the rest, and then whenever it comes across it, it'll cross that plane again. It can have weird movements. I think that's a blade thing more than it is a hamski thing, or it could be just my bow is the way I shoot them, like a weaker spine, so I really should just be running them full length. Right. But also, I think about this. I'm really analytical about things, but think about a dart versus a javelin, or a dart versus like a really long dart. If you throw it, it's naturally going to be straighter if it's longer, kind of like a crossbow bolt versus a compound arrow. A compound arrow should be more accurate if you had it in a hooter shooter versus a crossbow bolt at long distance. Theoretically, it should be. Whether it is or isn't, I don't know. But and I think I said straighter. I meant more accurate. But so like a longer arrow, I feel like is going to fly. It's not going to tumble like like a low caliber rifle bullet will tumble very easily. Whereas like you look at your long range precision bullets are longer and more ballistically aerodynamic, and that's for that purpose. So I like a longer arrow. And once I find that spot, I mark that spot, draw it back on the bow with my draw length that I like, and then mark where the rest is and cut the difference between those two. And if it sits right on it, it's perfect. But say if this is the point of the arrow over here, and here's where the arrow bends, and here's where my rest is at, I'll cut this difference. So I'll measure that difference, measure that on the end of whichever arrow that wobbles. So like if you spin an arrow, one end may or may not wobble more than the other, or they're both the same, or they don't wobble at all. Then so if one end like wobbles a tiny bit, I'm talking again like your target arrow is like 1,000th straightness. So a wobble, I'm talking like a tiniest vibration when you spin it, and just cut that difference between the two. And then from there, if as far as point weight goes, if I'm moving up, so say this E right here is my target, and I'm moving down towards it, and I fire dead center, but my arrow lands here. It was in the bow too long, follows where the bow went. So that's kind of what I do. I start with too much point weight, and then back it off down until it stops doing it. I don't want to go lower because I feel like you're like it'll be more. It should be more accurate the heavier your arrows are. Just like bullets. I mean, you get a really light bullet, and a lot more stuff affects it. But then arrows, same. I feel like it's the same principle. So you want it as heavy as you can get it, but there is such thing as too heavy. And as far as too light, I think that has to do with like your arrow stiffness or your arrow size. There's a lot of things, but I know like Zach Plonsky was talking about, he wants them as light as he can get them. He was even trying to get some 50 grain arrow points to put in his stuff the other day. And I'm like, you're crazy. I don't even know how you do that. Because I'll be shooting like 170s and he's like, bro, please try 100s or 120s. And I'll put them in there and I'll start shooting like 8s and 7s. And it's like horrible, like awful, like not even competitive. and it's like
that guy is,
I think
Zach
it's just unstable.
Is insane.
Yeah, and Zach's very analytical. So he'll the same way. He'll try something, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, then great. Now you know, and then you go back to what it is. Yeah. So
it's intriguing. It really is. We talked about that on Tim's podcast. But yeah, I completely agree with the point weight thing. I'm currently running 200s, and I used to run like 250s. And dude, like I would literally have shots where the pin was in the middle, but it was like kind of up and down bobble. Boom, like
whatever direction it was going, it follows.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, another thing is, so like if you have a little mistake, like if you were holding middle and then you fired and it moved at the last second, or even just the response from the bow firing was inconsistent. So like with the steady aim, you can see your vibration of your bow and watch the patterns of that. So if you had one that fired different, just if you hold your fingers out and make like 2 millimeters at 20 yards, 2 millimeters between your fingers is from the X ring to the 6 ring. So if you move that hand 2 millimeters, that's that far of a drop, so or that far of your bow aiming that low. And then tuning, I really just shoot a bear shaft good. That's if it's usually for me, it's kind of like if I were to group tune where you move your rests depending on your group size. There's all kinds of videos on it, but the angle or the direction of your group, move your rest that direction, whatever way, you'll get a better group. But for me, bear shaft tuning, you just shoot your bear shaft, and if it flies the same and hits the same as your impact with the vanes on it, that's the most forgiving way I found. And then from there, it's just draw length and stabilizer weight until it aims super good, and then just roll with it. And if it isn't aiming good, then obviously there's things to change for aiming. But then forgiveness wise, I don't know, the better you can get it to aim, the better forgiving I think it would be.
So tell us a little bit about the steady aim device.
Yeah, so it's like I think it weighs 2 grams. You clip it on your sight with like a little rubber band, and when you shoot, it detects G forces in your movement. So when you shoot, it'll like show you drawing back and then coming on the target. And when a shot goes, it'll even show like the vibration of your sight. Like it'll have like a zigzag as your bow would react and fall. And you can watch it, and then you can layer all those together to where every time you drop your bow, you can see the different angles. So like if I'm shooting a 3 spot, on the top target, it comes down here. On the bottom one, it comes down there, and the other one comes down here. And I think that it's best to, there's a mode where you can put in where the arrow impacted. So then it knows where you fired at and where the arrow left the bow at in relation to where it hit. And it's really good at that. But like little things you can see, like if your bow fired here, but your arrow left the bow there, there's such a tiny little movement of that. And I'm talking like from a dead center X to a bottom of the X, or bottom of the X to dead center. So the smallest, that you're talking at 20 yards, that's like a nanometer of movement that makes it do that. Just the smallest little change. So in the steady aim, I think I like watching my tendencies and looking at it like it's somebody else shooting and being like, well, here's what I would tell them. And then to do about it, and then do that to my bow. And again, like normally if you're good enough shot, you kind of have a hunch of what it is. So I'm doing that, and then I'll really just use it when I'm setting up a bow a couple of times just to kind of check things. And then from there, it's so minute, like a bow. I don't change a lot. I'll run the same setup. I run the same setup all of 3D season or all of indoor season. And indoors, the only thing that changed last year was adding a couple clicks when I went to Lancaster, and then taking those back out when I went to Vegas. So it's like literally all you move your site, just a couple clicks here and there for lighting.
Dude, the node thing, I have talked to you about that before. Yeah, so that's interesting. There's not a lot of information about that out there. So,
Yeah, it's Bodie, I think, was the first one that told me about it. He says we were shooting on a live video together, and he's like, yeah, I need to cut a half inch off these arrows, I think. I'm like, how would you notice? Like, what would that change? Like,
right.
how do you know that you need to cut a half inch off? What doing that and doing that? Or I think he said I cut off a half inch too much. And then
Oh,
so I'm
sure.
like, again, why would that matter? Why would that change it? But he shoots a blade. So I think with a blade,
Right.
it matters a lot more. And that's why you don't see a lot of guys like Tim or Kyle or Zach Plonsky. They'll cut it right off and it's perfect. And I haven't even tried with my gold tips to cut them off right at the rest. I just haven't had, extra arrows to play around with, and I should
Right.
soon. I think that's my next project. When I get new arrows in, is just cut them off at the rest and, run with those or see how good they shoot. And if they don't, but I kind of see like with a longer dart analogy, I kind of see that being the only advantage that I would gain or disadvantage. Because I mean, it's like when you're shooting really well, why change it? But I might cut
Sure.
3 arrows and try it, and then I might be shooting stupid good rounds. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that node thing, it makes sense. But what doesn't make sense though is how if the arrow is Tim talks a lot about dynamics of it. So like in
Sure.
movement instead of static, the dynamic arrow spine where when that shot fires, the arrow is not even flexing until I don't think it's moved about 3 inches is whenever it would really start to flex from the inertia. So it's like I think from like the arrow is not going to stay still and start flexing immediately. It's going to move forward a little bit, then start to flex when it hits the power curve of your bow. So it's like I could see it being a good thing. I could see it not being a good thing, but I think what it really comes down to is what kind of spine your bow likes, like a weaker or a stiffer spine. And I've had way better luck with weaker spines than stiffer ones for me. But I say weaker spine, but it's like X cutter is 250 spine and a triple X is a 150 spine, I think. So it's like weaker spine, but they're still so stiff for that bow with only a 120 point on them or 140 point. So
Right. I completely agree. I definitely need to play with spine more myself, but I've always been a proponent of shoot the weakest spine you can in
mhm,
most everything. But
yeah,
anyway,
and that's why I shoot gold tip because I don't have to choose spine. They only make it one for X cutter and triple X because I'm like, if and that's another reason too why I don't shoot skinny arrows yet, like competitively, because I'm like I don't want to have to jump down that rabbit hole of
Mhm.
having so many sets of arrows and testing because you can have a 350 spine arrow and a 300 spine arrow that react the exact same way just because of the arrow length or the point weight or a combination of both. So there's so many different inputs of what you could change that it's like it really is just I feel like just get a stiffer one and if it's not weak enough after you've put a lot of point weight to where you put too much in it and now it reacts with the bow like we were talking about, then just get a weaker spine and try that. But it's like I don't have to get so many arrows to do that. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
Yeah. I had some revelations that were like 400 spine,
Mhm.
and I cut them so freaking short. I'm talking like
Mhm.
I had to move my rest so far back just to get them to shoot like
Mhm.
24 and a half inches probably. And they shot terrible,
Yeah.
absolutely terrible. And then I shot some X impacts that were I think a 400 spine,
Mhm.
slightly heavier point and longer, and they shot so good. But yeah, I've had that situation where you do cut the arrows too short, and especially with the blade, you can definitely see that. But
Yeah, and it's rough because now you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to wait on new arrows to come in from
yeah,
Lancaster
right.
or from your manufacturer. It's so rough sometimes when you're just stuck with this setup, and you're like, I don't want to go and
Yes.
spend $300 on new arrow shafts, and because I could run down to the bow shop and buy some, but who wants to do that because you made the mistake of doing that? So
Right.
it's not fun when it's something's not right, but you only changed one thing, so you know what it was. It's like yeah, I feel you on that when you're like, oh,
Yeah.
you're not
And,
shooting the
and
best.
that's the thing. Like with people that are like at a professional level, you're going to get equipment more. And at that point, I would just play with this stuff like that more. But like if
Oh yeah,
you're an amateur, like just focus on the big chunks first and get those nailed for yourself. But just fit.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
that's too, like shooting the fat arrows that come in one spine. That's 100% exactly why. Cause I'm like, I don't need to focus on that as much because I don't have the equipment and the resources to do that. But when you may get a lot of arrows every year and then, you have a back stock at your house that you have several, sets of several spines, you can play with that. So, and that's something
yeah.
so little, so small that, if a lot of times I'd say 90% of the X's on an 80-yard field faces that are missed are not because your arrows are too weak or too stiff. It's other stuff. But when it wasn't
Yes.
that, you're trying to gain that little bit in the pro class, that 1%. So, and that again ties right back into it. And those tiniest things matter. It's crazy. And it's kind of scary to think about, but
Yes.
you're gonna have those resources, I think, coming to
Yeah.
you.
Now, as far as Aerospine, what I have noticed is a lot of people they choose Aerospine based upon the chart online for their bow poundage and draw length and all this.
Mhm.
And I personally think you can get any Aerospine to work if your
Mhm.
bow can tune that arrow.
Yeah. So the 400s that you
Sure.
didn't have shoot good, it was because they couldn't tune.
Well, I mean, they shot a bullet hole through paper, but they just didn't group well. And
Mm.
honestly, it makes me wonder, like, if I would have bear shaft tuned it, I would have probably seen a difference, like a pretty bad bear shaft, I would
Yeah.
think.
Like if you like really extreme group tuned them after the bear shaft or something, is that what you mean? Like having a really bad bear shaft shot or?
Yeah, just like,
Oh, like they
like at
had a
20
bad bear
yards.
shaft. So trying that would have, is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
I have no idea. I didn't try them.
Okay.
But if I'm sure if I would have even at 20 yards, I'm sure it would have been like probably in the red on a Vegas face. My
Yeah.
guess.
And
But
with
even then,
with skinnies, red that's not a lot out of tune. I mean, with a big,
right.
I guess with skinnies, red is pretty far out of tune. But with a bigger arrow, red would be not far fetched. Oh, I forgot. I was gonna say something. I don't know. I'll remember it. Oh, I remembered the thing from earlier,
Okay.
but I just forgot it. Actually, I remembered it. That's so
Come
that's so
on.
fun. I remembered it earlier, but I just drew a blank again. That's me for you. So that's
It
personal.
happens. It happens, man. Get you some ashwagandha or some supplements. Maybe you'll get some better, like get some alpha brain.
I've been thinking about is that USADA accepted? Do you know? There's
Dude,
apps out there that you could look it up.
what do you mean?
So there's apps out there that you could see if it's USADA drug test compatible. So like you can go in the app and look up like your drug brand and like what you would take like over the counter stuff, and then it'll tell you if USADA it would trigger their thing or not. And that's not to like get around it, but it's like a database that says this
Just
would
so you
this would
know.
cause a drug test and this wouldn't. So
Yeah.
I heard about that
I
this
pers-
week. That you can do.
I personally I have taken Alpha Brain before. This is completely random, but we'll just talk about it. But
Don't give me a to think about what I forgot twice.
yeah, there you go. So I took Alpha Brain before, and I've shot taking Alpha Brain. Like, they have like focus packets, and then they have the pill form. And for me, it just turns me into a freaking zombie. Like I feel like I'm so focused that I lose focus.
Yeah.
So it just messes
like
with
ADHD
me.
meds.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
I mean, I've been diagnosed with ADHD myself, but
And
that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But
yeah, it's
yeah,
pretty obvious, but I don't take my meds anymore.
that's okay.
It's pretty obvious, but I think that makes me who I am. It's kind of
Yeah,
when I was younger in school, it was hard. That's so hard to focus. But now I'm older. I kind of you can like divert yourself and become
dude. And
obsessed
this
with
is the
archery.
thing.
So
This is the thing. Yes. I've been in the same boat, and it's like people that are like ADHD type profiles. These people, if you're shooting archery, it's like you can channel that energy into shooting. I feel like there's a lot of guys that are like ADHD type people that shoot a bow really, really, really well.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
the best part for me is the work ethic. So like for me, if something's not right, whether it be like if my foot itches or if I'm not sitting right or like my wallet's in my pocket, I have to
Yes.
adjust and constantly like moving around to do that. But like with shooting, a couple days ago, I was at the range and I was like messing with my stuff and I forgot like one of the long arrow wrenches that you go down the back end of the arrow to change point
Yes.
weight. Because when I was in Vegas, I super glued the points in the end of the arrow with
Mm.
some, I forget what it was, but it was some super glue that some random archery company there had for me to try or whatever to use it. And that was because I bought the 23s to shoot in the World Archery. I forgot to mention that I shot in the indoor World Finals, and that's why I'm going to Neems this year. I want to try to make that again. That was really cool. But they won't, if you heat it up, it won't come out. Even if I get it so hot that like I when I'm heating up an arrow and a point, I hold the carbon around the point so I can kind of feel how hot it is underneath that carbon.
Sure.
While I'm heating it up. And then normally though, I hold it there for like 2 seconds and I just have pressure on it with the wrench. And once it starts to move, then I just pull it out. And then it isn't that, and I could just grab it. Like it's not hot at all. But these ones, I'm talking like it would start to smoke, like
Yes.
it would start to smoke before it. And I'm like, yeah, let's not do that. And once I'm like, okay, it feels kind of hot on my hand. So yeah, but I had to go get a wrench, and I was so anxious that I didn't have that. Like I was like, Amy, I need to go home and grab this wrench. Like I'm losing my mind right now. Because I was there and I was like shooting, but not on the clock. But if they needed me, then I'd hop on the clock. So I was like, hey, let me know if you guys need me in the next hour or so, because I'm gonna need to run and go home because I'm losing my mind. And I actually took my 23s. What I was doing is I added 40 grains to the point, I think, and brought them from a 130 to, or no, I brought them from a 150 to 190.
Okay.
And I think that's because so I'm shooting the same ish like draw weight, like same setup for the 23s and 27s. But different bows, but they're really close to identical as far as
Right.
specs that would make an arrow fly. But like I said, with the arrows points being so light that they're just scattered and it's kind of they're unstable, I'd say. But then I was like, I feel like I need to add point weight, so I went home and put 190s in the 23s, and then I had a hunch that I should put 40 grains in it. I put 40 grains in it, and now they're at 516 grains, I believe. And my 27s are 518. So I added 40 grains and they're shooting lights out. They're shooting just as good as my 27s, but they're just a 23 instead of a 27. So and that's the thing too. People are like, skinnies or smaller arrows are way more forgiving. And that might be for them, but I've never had that. Though usually for me, it's the larger arrows that are more forgiving. Last year I went to the Paris, Texas indoor ASA shoot that they have for the buckles every year. I went to shoot that, and I just shot my indoor setup the week before Vegas. I just put a sight tape on and shot a sight tape, went with my same Vegas everything, and I shot on 20 targets is like 36 up, I think, or it was close to that. It was high.
Wow.
I only
Yeah.
missed a few, and it was stupid. Like I had some that fired it like at the belly of the target, but I threw my bow up, and at 50 yards, it smacked the upper. I'm like, I can't explain it, but it just shoots. When you get them to shoot at 20, they'll shoot everywhere. Oh, and you're talking about practice stuff that I do that I feel like not a lot of other people do is shoot your indoor bow at 40 yards. When you're setting up a bow and you only have shot that bow at 20 yards, I did this last year. So I got my new bow in that Verdict, and I was shooting it, and then it was shooting great for about a month, like really good, actually better than ever. And then it just slowly plummeted, and I'm like, what the heck? And then I was like, I was actually at a Christmas dinner for work something, and I was like, I have not shot that bow past 20 yards at all. I guarantee you, if I took it to 50 or 40 yards, it would shoot so much better. And I took it out to 40, and I took a lot of the front weight off, and it aimed really good. And I brought it to 20 yards, and then obviously it shot very well the rest of the season. And through 3D season, had that same 16 in the front, 20 in the back, and that's what worked for me. And I think I put longer bars on it, went to a 33 and a 15 instead of the 30 and a 12. So yeah. At 40 yards, at least, it'll tell you everything you need to know, I feel like, to shoot good at 20. And like 3D practice is normally at 40 to 45 yards for me.
That is a great piece of advice. I have not done that. And I always feel like I personally suck really bad sometimes indoors, because it's like, dude, you haven't even shot it past 20. It's like you're not seeing the pin movement that you would normally see further away.
Yeah.
So then you won't get that data to make decisions with how to get your setup comfortable
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Like you have an
performing.
ASA bow, and I know you've had this before, but like with towards the end of your ASA season, you've got everything dialed, and you've had time with
Mhm.
that bow, and like you pull it back, and at 50 yards, it just sits, it just squats right on the 12, and it doesn't move. And if you shot that same setup with 27s for indoor, it's like that would be perfect if it did that every time at 20 yards too. And then so I was thinking about that. I'm like, and I took my bow at 40, and I'm like, I would never shoot this setup at an ASA tournament with how it was aiming, with the stabilizers.
Sure.
So then I changed that up
Easy to
and then
do.
went to 20, and it helped a lot.
It's very easy to like overkill things on a bow indoors. Like I
Mm-hmm.
feel like with the stabilizer weight, I might try that out. I might personally like that's something I haven't played with enough. Like I have the highest holding weight I feel like I can run comfortably. That with the stabilizer combo I like.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if I took that system and dialed down the holding weight a little bit, dialed down the stabilizer weight a little bit, and tried that, like I'd love to see what that would do. But I wouldn't do that unless I stepped back and I saw that, hey, you're like looping like this or something like that, or
Yeah.
hey, it's not coming to the middle fast enough or something like that.
Yeah. And that's like, I kind of across the whole, 6 ring to 6 ring on a Vegas face. That's what you're doing in the middle of the X or the 10 ring at 20, or I
Sure.
guess if you really ratioed it down, if you're moving across the 9 at 20, you'll be moving across the red at 40. So 10 ring, and at 40, you're going 9 ring everywhere. And you're like, I would never shoot this like that. So, and then I think too, if you have a setup dial like an ASA bow, if you're shooting 50-yard shots and you're hitting, 9 out of 10, 12 rings in practice, and then you go to 20 yards, you're 99 for 100 at least. So yeah, I made it a point this year to not miss anything that I knew I was going to hit. And granted, it's
Why?
like when you have that confidence, when things are rolling. Last year, I think I even told you this. I'm like, anything 45 and in, I know I'm going to hit it when I step up. Like that level of confidence is really great, because then you walk up to a 45 yarder, you're like, yes, it's a close one. Like yeah, I can hit this one. So I've had days like that where
I
since
haven't
what?
even gotten to the good part yet.
Yeah. I measured that D
So
loop. It's 11 and some change. Like with the two lines, like here's 11 millimeters, and this one's like here, like on the edge of it. So probably 11 and a quarter millimeters. No.
they're just like that.
Yeah. Like it's close, but yeah, I mean, it's like, it's enough that it doesn't even like come out really. It just kind of goes across like that. It's real short, but it's enough.
So with command shooting, I know you command shoot. Tell us a little bit about what command shooting is.
The way you said that, you were like, I know you command shoot. It's like the FBI. So there's different there's different ways of doing it. There's definitely a right and a wrong to everything. And
Sure.
for example, when I shoot, I want to emulate a hooter shooter, and I'm into, it's kind of funny. I'm just like Tim. I'm a little bit into like target shooting rifles. So
Nice.
I know a bit about that, and I've learned from my dad. He talking about muzzleloaders and different loads, and he used to be really big into doing that, and he's tested all the bullet loads out there. So shout out to him. But command shooting. So I want to emulate a hooter shooter. Like with rifles, you don't want to shoot off the shoulder. You want to have it in a bench while you're sighting it in, so it's good. So with a rifle, if you were to flinch as you shoot, obviously it's going to miss. So if you command shoot and you flinch as you command it, you're obviously going to miss. But if you're in a hooter shooter, it doesn't matter if you slap your trigger and it's really light, or if you slowly squeeze that trigger in the hooter shooter and it goes off surprise. It's either way. If my front arm is way out and I'm at full draw and I'm aiming, when that bow goes off from my face forward, I want it to look like it was a surprise. And I want it to act like it was a surprise. So like my front hand doesn't know it's coming. And that's what a lot of guys run into, is they think that punching means punching, or command shooting means punching. And I don't know if you've ever seen videos of Jimmy Lutz sometimes. He knows they're out there. So it's not knocking him at all. He's a great shot. But like sometimes, yeah, you'll see him just like whack it. And it's like, I don't know how he does it, but it works. Right. And I think that it's because his front hand is probably so good that it doesn't matter what's going on back here, whether it's a surprise or not, it released the string the same way. It's just with me, I used to do it a lot better. I'm talking, a year and a half ago, right after Vegas last year. But as I'm bringing, I want my pin float to come in from the bottom, and it doesn't matter what direction it comes in from. The bottom's the best because you can control it really slowly going up. Whereas if you're dropping low to the target, it's easy to like give up and let go and let it drop. But yeah, raising it up is I feel like the way to go for me. And as it's coming in, I like to squeeze more and more and more. And the timing of it, when it goes off, it just works like magic. And what I would do is if it goes off early or late, then play with my button tension. And it's usually pretty light because even though even though my button is super light, I was still squeezing my button for about a second or two. And I'm talking like a hair trigger, like, like less than an ounce sometimes. But I'm squeezing so slow, it feels like skin cells. You're just slowly putting more and more of your thumb on it. And I'm not even touching my trigger. It's just grazing it. I can just feel it, like if you like graze the hair on your arm, it's like that. Like you're not even touching your arm, but you can feel something touching it. As I'm coming to the middle, I slowly squeeze it like that, and then it goes off in the middle. Now it's more executing it where when it's in the middle, it fires. And it's a sight picture thing, like a lot like Kyle. So like if my aim pattern is so consistent from shot to shot, and the angle that it comes in at and the speed it comes in at, some shots are worse than others and it'll go off early. But again, the forgiveness, it usually hits X's. And as far as like the button tension, touch as light as I can go. And I still graze it like that. But when it gets to the middle, I just put, anything more than grazing it will make it go off. So once that pin's in the middle, it just goes off, and you can't think about it too. So a lot of guys, if you didn't get good at shooting by command shooting, I feel like it's so hard to try it and stick with it, because if you try it, you're gonna be thinking about it. So you can't think about when it fires, and you can't tell yourself now in quotes. Like you can't be like,
exactly,
now shoot it. That's not good. So you just slowly squeeze. And I'm so like slower than anybody I've ever seen shooting. That's how slow I try to squeeze, because again, it's so light. And then with it being super light, like Zach says that he runs his buttons medium heavy, not heavy, but not light. He runs them by medium, but he wraps his thumb so much, it's preloading that trigger so much. So he's like right on the edge of it firing. I don't like that because it's kind of like a click and a hinge. My button, when my thumb grazes my button, that's kind of like my click. Like I know I'm at that point in my shot. Versus if I wrap it and get heavy on it, Paige talks about she doesn't know how heavy she is on it sometimes, and then the shots will fire a little earlier or a little later than others, and so that's kind of what I would run into. But yeah, if you flinch at all, that's not good. So I want to emulate a hooter shooter, but just shoot it when it's in the middle. And with a hinge, I don't know what it was. I think it's just inconsistencies on a bunch of different things. There could be so many things like your tension while you're holding the bow back and your release angle. But release angle is I've never struggled with it. And another thing is I said I've never struggled with it. I don't typically struggle with things until I start to think about them while I'm shooting. So I let everything just be natural. And that's kind of what I went to from trying to get as good as I could with a hinge. I just naturally try to shoot and naturally try to feel what's going to hit the middle. So whether it's right or wrong, if it's going to hit the middle, it'll work. Like I almost was running 180 or 190 grains on my 3D arrows this year, but I couldn't get a sight tape past 55 yards and it would contact the arrow. So it was such a drastic change. My sight tape was so long that from 20 to 50, it was such a big change here, but they grouped so good at 50 because they were just so consistent. So then I just went back down to 140 and finished out the rest of the year well. But I can't explain it. Just whatever's naturally you feel like you're going to hit the middle more, then just do that. Like if you see Nick Capper shooting, not to say that he pushes the hinge, but if you're watching in Vegas 2022 when he got second, you can see his hinge and he would shoot the shot wherever it was. And I think that's a lot similar to mine, where like you're on the edge of it, and like as you bring your pin to the middle, you shoot it. Oh, it wasn't Vegas, it was Lancaster, where they had a really close up on his release, and you could see he wasn't necessarily punching the release on the hinge, because you can't punch a hinge, but he does it so well, and he's so talented at it that his front hand doesn't move, and that hinge goes off. And when you're that good at it, you can get away with that. And that's what worked for him, and obviously it was probably more natural to do it that way. So yeah, I tried shooting a hinge for a while, and then I grew up shooting a wrist strap and then went to a thumb button. I shot one of those $5 Walmart not Walmart, but like $5 Allen, I think, thumb buttons. That's
Yeah.
plastic.
Yeah.
You can find on Amazon. It's like
Oh my
$6.99.
gosh.
So I
Yes.
shot one of those for a long time, and like they have so much travel, and I'm like, you could feel it. It's like a 2-stage trigger, like a pistol. You could feel all that travel go out, and it stopped on a wall. And once I hit
Yeah.
that trigger wall, and you know where you're at. So I like that, and I know that there's clicking thumb buttons out there now. Scott has this clicking hinge, or it's a wrist strap, but it has a double finger that you can use kind of like a hinge. So when you get here, you anchor like a hinge, but then you squeeze it's the Scott Verge. But yeah, you squeeze it and it clicks, and you keep squeezing and it goes. I love that release. And if Scott come out with a thumb button that clicks, but you could change the travel between the click to fire, I know that's
Yes.
something you can't ask for that, because it's like, if you've seen the internals of a thumb button, it's not possible. That I don't think that would be,
Yeah.
unless
It
unless
would
you
be
took the
completely.
sear, yeah, unless you took the sear design out of an Apex, or one where you could change the click to fire, and somehow be able to individually move two halves of a sear inside of a thumb button apart from each other. It's possible, I believe, but that would take so many internal parts and stuff. It's like, it's something that's way out there if you could internally move that. But yeah, if you could get a button that I feel like would click. But Nathan Brooks told me he shoots that Verge as a thumb button, the wrist strap one Scott makes. So he flips around backwards and took the finger peg off, and he was shooting it as a thumb button like that. So you could jimmy rig something that would get it to emulate what you were wanting. So, and I think that him telling me that is kind of maybe could have led him to be like, hey guys, we should try to work on something like this. So maybe it might come out. Who knows? But yeah, just the thought that he was trying that, it's very possible, I think. But parts to, because like, so putting a clicker in it wouldn't be too hard, because it's just like a sear on like a Longhorn or any other release that you can't change. You have to change out the sears to change the travel click to fire. Right. You could do that, and that's not hard, but I don't know, it'd just be a lot. So, but yeah,
you just have to get the assembly right.
What's that?
I think you just have to get the assembly right, and it has to not move. Those two things.
Yeah, and the movement's hard too, because like Scott has like a locking screw. I think all of them have locking screws on them that you can lock it back, and then nothing moves. But with Paige and how she starts shooting a hinge, because you can't determine how much thumb pressure is on it if you're running a heavier button. That's why I have that I just graze my thumb on it, and I know it's in the same spot every time. And then the timing of when the button fires, that I adjust the tension for when it fires, and it just naturally, I feel like when I'm shooting really well myself, not like that the bow is perfect, but when I'm shooting great, you don't think about anything, because everything's perfect. You don't think about anything. But if you start to think about like your back elbow, or you're wrapping your thumb, or like where your peep alignment is and stuff like that, then you start to have those misses because you're thinking about them and doing it differently than what's natural. So you just, if something's wrong, it's not natural. So you adjust your stabilizer weight, or you adjust your holding weight or something.
I agree. With command shooting, like I started command shooting, and you cannot think about what's going on. It's like you literally shoot yourself in the foot, and that's kind of a good thing,
Yeah, it has to go off naturally. It can't, and it's completely subconscious. And that's kind of to play into how I got started, is like, I didn't learn, there wasn't like any single person. I watched a ton of bow setup videos, a ton of the old ASA shoot downs, the old Vegas shoot downs. I could name a lot of different Vegas shoot downs, and 2013 Vegas, watching that one so many different times. And
the first one.
just like certain ones I've seen so many times, like the Levi Morgan, Jamie Jamison we mentioned. I've seen those a lot, and you learn a lot from there. So not to say that I didn't learn from anybody and I learned it all by myself. I can't say that, because I did learn a lot from the videos. But with going naturally to what I feel like hits the middle the most, that's what I think. I haven't learned from anybody that that's just what's going to work for me. And then just thinking about it, like if you raise your D loop, it's going to change the elevation of your front hand versus your back hand. So when you're pulling it at an angle, and you're creating a triangle. That makes sense. That's the kind of stuff I think about it as a 12-year-old, that it's like that makes sense, if you're, and the one thing that I haven't yet to this day understood, okay, when you're tuning a bear shaft, or you're changing a bullet hole or anything, or broadhead tuning, if you're up and down tear, it makes sense, like lower the rest and it's in line now. But left and right is the opposite.
It's the opposite.
That baffles me. Absolutely baffles me. that up and down, you'd move your rest away from the broadhead, and then left and right, you move it towards the broadhead. Or if you have like limb adjustment or whatever, use your normal tuning thing. Don't be moving your rest if you don't have to. But on the older bows, you had to. Like I had an elite ritual that didn't yet have the set technology, the limb pockets, so I had to move the rest. Or you can move the shims, but I didn't have a bow press, so it's like move the rest, or else you're just gonna have to sight into your broadheads being off. So it's like.
Right.
It baffles me. If anybody knows why broadhead tuning is opposite left and right than it is up and down, please reach out, because that's baffled me. It doesn't make any sense. It has to do with something dynamic, or how the arrow, like if it's coming, because like if it's out of tune, it's coming from an angle in the rest, because your string is moving on this plane, and if it's not in line, then your rest is holding the point here. So it makes sense why I would kick your arrow like that. If your strings, so here's your rest and your point of your arrow is here, you draw it back and now you're out of line. Well, your string isn't moving it in the line of the arrow, it's moving it straight forward where the rest is pointing towards. So that would make sense why it'd be a right tear, or a high tear, low tear. But left and right is opposite. That doesn't make sense. Like if you think about a slow motion arrow shot, why would it be throwing the nock to the left? Because the string is moving the string back and forth, or your cams back and forth, is opposite of moving your rest back and forth. Exactly. So moving the string towards that tear would make sense. But why? Yeah. So like, and like if you're static, if your bow is a nock right tear, that means your rest is too far to the right of your arrow. So your arrow is really sitting statically in the bow as the nock left, but for some reason it makes a nock right, because you have to move the rest. It's opposite, but up and down it makes sense because it's pointing high or low. So yeah, it baffles me. That's the only paradox I still don't understand to this day.
Yeah. And to add to that, I know that a lot of people, like when I first started, I always thought you tuned with the rest, but the reality is the rest does not move the arrow in a paper tear enough, and shimming the bow or doing something with the cams left and right, like the set technology on the elites, like that is so much better. It's such a larger adjustment.
Yeah. Well, because then if you have your rest in the middle of the bow and you have your, everything's in line and in tune with that. Now, I used to run out of, I think, left travel on my sight. So on my result, I had to move the whole tune to the left. I had to move the rest to the right. I think I had to move the rest to the right and then change the tune on the cams for that. And that's why you want it in the middle, where I move my cams over with the shims and then go with the set technology, because then it's in the middle and I have that maximum adjustment. But if I'm already maxed out for a nock left tear, and then I can't get enough travel on my sight, well, now I'm maxed out. So what do you do? If I have to move the rest over, that makes the left tear even worse.
So what is your definition of the mental game? And do you do anything to work on your mental game?
Yeah, a bit of it. I went through an archery coach, and if you want to know about it, reach out to me, because I don't know, she's so busy. So she'll have to take appointments sometimes. But so I reached out to an archery coach, started talking to her a lot about, what my goals were, and then how to reach those goals, and how easy I think it is to reach those goals as well, is a big thing. So if you are, you go to if you practice really well, there's no reason why you shouldn't shoot well in a tournament. But I think, again, the setup part of it has a lot to play with your performance at a tournament, because your mistakes may be magnified, but magnified even more just because you're under pressure, or you might make them more because you're under pressure. So I don't know. I think the nerves wise of my mental game hasn't gone down, but the confidence is the biggest part. The confidence that I've gained, maybe or maybe not even through, mental training, or, as any sort of sports psychologist. Those are, a lot of archers use them. You'd be shocked. And even the best ones you could think of, like Joel Turner, that's exactly what he does, is that under pressure, how to think, so that's a really good, I don't know, a really good analogy that it's a lot like that when you work with a sports psychologist, is how to think and how to perform under pressure, because that's what you can't really teach or learn until it happens, until you've been faced with that. So yeah, the biggest learning part was the confidence to shoot under pressure and shoot through the nerves. So the nerves never go away for me, but shooting through them, I think, is really good. But I like to thrive off of it and think of myself as more excited to shoot under nerves. But the hardest part for me is I get cold. I don't know if you do that, but if I walk into a range and it's I forgot a jacket from my car to the range and you're cold, it makes everything 10 times worse. So staying warm and staying hydrated is a big thing. Like in Vegas, you'll see me wearing jackets all around everywhere.
Vegas is hot.
Unless I'm
I
shooting.
thought Vegas was hot.
It is inside, but I'm talking like I want to be sweating before I walk in there to go shoot. So I'm like my body's just warm. Because if I'm cold and I'm like shivering at all, it makes shooting on the nerves, and it makes you a little sore, I feel like right off the bat. But yeah, like if I'm sitting in the stands, I'll be trying to, I don't know, drinking water kind of distracts me from any nerves or anything. It's kind of like one of those things where like if you're being awkward and you don't know what to do, so you do something to like not be as awkward, like drink water. So that's kind of like it's more of like a soothing thing, I guess, for me. But that's one thing I do under nerves a lot is I drink a lot of water. And I wind up having to go to the bathroom in the middle of Vegas and like run up the stairs and at the target change and then I don't know who I asked, like Bodie to hang my target for me if you can. Or if I like to be on top, or no, I like to, if I'm on bottom ever, then that's a perfect opportunity because then I get a whole extra 4 minutes, of someone shooting and then waiting for his scores and, whatever else before I get to have to go up there and shoot. But I think really just the confidence, like knowing what you do at home and knowing that, and then learning to use that in your advantage was a big part of it. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think just the confidence and knowing what I do at home and going to the range and then knowing how to do that under pressure. And yeah, the confidence I think is crazy.
Yeah.
So that's the thing too, changing from amateur to pro. So you've been through the same transition I'm about to embark on where, you go from the top dog in amateur class. Every time you walk out there, you're probably going to win that tournament. And that confidence is unreal because you go out there and it's just easy. It's sure. It may sound cocky to say, but it feels like, even if you didn't shoot the best, it's still going to work. Like how I say, when you're shooting really well, you don't even have to think, it just happens. So you just walk out there and you're going to win. And then you win and you're like, oh, big shock. And it's like, or maybe you didn't shoot that well and you won. So having that confidence going into the pro class is going to be a whole different ballgame because those guys are good. Like beating amateurs is way different than beating pros. 100%. And I say beating, but winning, I guess. Being successful in the amateur classes and placing high is way different in your depth of competition. Not that it's not there, because you have, again, a lot of amateurs that are coming up and shooting in the pro ranks in the next year or two, but the depth is like every one of those pros out there, for the most part. Some guys just shoot pro because they like to, but for the most part, every one of those guys out there is shooting pro because they went through that same exact thing. They dominated and went pro. So they've all been there. They've all done that. And then now they're pro for years. And some of them, like Kyle, have just been dominating. Like, look at Justin Hanna shooting 3D. It's like, they've some of those guys' names that come to mind. It's like they've been there and done it. So they have that confidence going into it, just like you did. And now you may feel like you're the other guys that may be shooting with you whenever you were an amateur that you're like, oh, like, yeah. No, you know what I mean? Now it's like, oh, Kyle's coming out here. So, you're not going to win, but you can't shoot to beat people. I know you have to shoot for scores. If I were to go out there in a tournament and be like, I want to beat Kyle Douglas, you're never going to do that with that mindset. And I've heard that, not that I've ever thought that. I've known that for a long time, just from my baseball background. You don't go out there and here's cool. Dan McCarthy also has a really high level baseball, I guess, experience or career. I don't know if he never went pro, I don't think, but he did really high level baseball and like the traveling baseball and stuff. So sure, it was really cool to connect with him like that. But what was I saying? So like in baseball, you're not going to be competing to beat that team. You play to have perfect games and to not miss those, stopping the ball and to not have those simple strikeouts that were just bad decisions, or, being a pitcher, just, being in the moment and taking advantage of those moments and shooting for scores. And yeah, it's, you can't go out there to beat Kyle. You have to go out there and beat yourself, really, and be better than it would be if you didn't do that. So that's kind of how those guys are. And I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear the perspective from Kyle. Cause like, I know like all the guys that are winning is like, they know what it's taken to get to that level and to win. Sure. So I know that Kyle isn't walking out there knowing that he's going to win, because he knows if you make one mistake, you go from, top of the leaderboard to now you're out of it, because the point spread is so thin. And that's something we can talk about too, is ASA not ASA, but people saying that ASA should go to 60 yards. I have opinions on that I really would like to share because I don't
Yeah,
like.
go for
Yeah,
it. So ASA, is that just a amateur class and a pro class or just the pros?
I think people are talking about just the pros, but there's been a lot of people saying that they should move it to 60 yards
Okay.
and 60-yard max. And my opinion is they shouldn't do that. They should make the ranges harder because there's some tournaments like at
Okay.
Metropolis. If
Oh
you
my goodness.
watch, yeah, if you watch the scores, they're all shooting that good. So that tells you that the range wasn't that hard.
It was
You know,
not.
and I guess
The
it's different
second
because
day
I
was
wasn't
easy.
shooting that range, but when everybody's shooting 60 up, and then you go to the next tournament and it's like, then the scores are back to average like mid to low 50s, and below that it goes. But then so if people, I feel like a lot of people that aren't pros are the ones that are saying that. It's like you don't really have a clue, and neither do I. But if you were to take the guys that are winning, and they say it's because the scores are too high and it's like too hard to win. Well, if you went to 60 yards, the guys that are winning now would dominate so much more because all it would do is just spread the scores out a lot more.
It's a
And
good
then it
point.
would make it impossible to win shoot-offs as well, because if you're coming into leaderboard, in fifth place, granted, if you come in fifth place, yeah, there was something you could do about it because you could have shot better and gotten in first. But if you came into the shoot-off so far behind the first place guy, it doesn't make it as dramatic score changes. Like Perkins won, I believe it was 2019 Foley, maybe, but
Yeah.
maybe it was 2020. Yeah, it was 2020 Foley, the first tournament, not the classic. But in 2020, he went out there and he was at the bottom of the leaderboard, and then Kevin Dukes was leading it, and he was 10 points back or 12 points back, I think, maybe 8. Pretty big point gap, and he
Yes.
climbed all the way up and just went 14, 14, 14 and won it. But so yeah, if you went to 60-yard max, I know that scares me, one, because it's so much harder to shoot 60 yards than 50. But I've been to like some local stuff that you can shoot out to 70, and I was shooting 14 rings left and right. You can ask Zach about that, and you can ask him how good he shot. It was he has a lot of. He's really funny when he talks about how good he shot, because it was a struggle, and he'll say that. But it was actually a really interesting dynamic, because on the targets that he didn't shoot well, I came in second, and the game plan was if he was a 10, I shoot at the 14 every time. But if he wasn't a 10, so like on all the 14s that I missed, out of 20 targets, it was like 4. I think and 2 of them I didn't even go for the 14 because he already shot it, and I didn't want to ruin his arrow because we already had a 14 on the card. But it's like a 2-man scramble, kind of best arrow out of both of you, and your team best arrow out of both of you goes on the scorecard. So he would shoot, and it would normally be like a 12 or a 10, and then I would shoot at the 14. There were some times when he had saved me, and he shot whatever it was, and then my score was not a 14, and then on there. So that's kind of how that worked. But what was I talking about before that? Oh, so you can shoot at 70 yards accurately, but I think that it's going to spread out. If you look at the targets and where the holes are in targets, it'll spread that out quite a bit. Because again, in known class, everybody's going to be shooting at every single ring on every single target. So it'll spread out the scores quite a bit, but I think it'll just make it harder to win. And I don't know if the argument's that it's harder to win or scores are too high, but either way, if it's harder to win and if scores were too high, either way, the competition is going to be the same, because you're not competing against the range, you're competing against the other people on the range.
Right.
So the competition and the level of difficulty will be the exact same that you'd see. But the problem is then it'd be like, such and such is winning every single tournament, every single ASA, because you would see that, because there's going to be 2 or 3 guys like Jimmy and Kyle this year. They were both shooting really well. And I think Brent Platt had won, he shot like 60 something up at Metropolis. So like those guys and the leaders on Shooter of the Year are probably going to be the top 5 guys at every single tournament. And you'll see that every time, just because they do that. And you might see a more widespread equipment, like more guys shooting 23s or skinnies or whatnot. But yeah, that's kind of my take, is like, I don't want to see that, because I like, and Tim would completely disagree, but I like how 3D is becoming a little bit more and more 12 is par. And the rest of it, if it's like, if you're a 12, you're good, and everything else is not good, even a 10. So whereas it used to be a 10 is good and a 12 is awesome. I kind of like that aspect, because it's like because I don't know whether or not it's 50 or 60 yards, 12 is going to be par either way, and everybody's going to be shooting at them. So a good shot's going to be a 12, and a not as good shot could be an 8 or a 5 or a 10 if you're lucky.
10-yard jump is pretty crazy. I could understand a 5-yard jump, but
yeah,
there's an infrastructure problem. So
Yep, I've heard that.
if you move everyone back in the pro class 5 yards, you have to make sure that all of the tournament venues can support that.
Exactly.
And all of the local and state ASA ranges need to be able to do the exact same thing on their home
Yep.
turf. And yeah, and there are often times where like you're just making so many people have to change up so many things. Like not saying this is what we could do or should do. I think we should keep things the same right now. We haven't had a 40 up at an ASA yet, so it's like let's just keep going until it happens. But you could just make the ring smaller, right? Instead of
And I wouldn't mind that. Yeah, I wouldn't mind if they went. There's because if you ever see the old 12 rings, they're actually a little bit smaller. They're actually like I don't know, like the new ones it's a 12 or it's a 1-inch circle. That's the inner diameter. And then like with the ring and with an arrow diameter. So like here's the 1-inch ring. And like on the inside of my finger, it's 1 inch. And my finger is like the outside of the ring where if you still touch it, and then you have an arrow diameter. So like my thumb is a bigger arrow. So it can be way out here. And you have the rings pulling sometimes where it touches it. So you can really be within, I would say if the center of your arrow is within, 3/4 of an inch, I think it would touch 50% of the 12s if you pulled it right and very easily. But within half an inch of it, yeah, you're hitting every 12. So
yeah,
I mean,
sure.
you're really shooting at a 1.5 inch circle of the center of your arrow has to hit for you to hit a 12. So yeah, making them smaller and actually a 1-inch ring, or maybe changing the foam. I know some years they had harder foam that didn't pull very well, and before that it was really soft foam. But targets were tearing up too fast. Yeah. This year, I feel like the foam this year was really good. Been wearing out a little faster than they want. But I remember 2 years ago when we were in Paris is whenever they tried out the new foam they had last year was super hard. But all the rest of the targets were not that new foam, and they were just torn up. It was so bad. But that foam
the new foam isn't bad. It's just hard to pull.
I like the new foam how it is right now.
Yeah, I feel like now I don't know about the paint, but I feel like the foam, it just holds up like longer.
Yeah.
So
the paint, I like solid targets because then you can see them the whole time. The paint makes it rough. It makes it rough to aim off of, because then like the whole scoring area is like on a black buck, for example. The whole scoring area is like gray, right where you want to be at, but it's like a gray piece that's like an oval that's the size of a football where everybody is hit. So you really can't pinpoint the rings. But on a brand new, and you guys are shooting normally, unless it's the end of the round, normally they're pretty new, right? Or they're brand new at the very beginning, right. And then they're brand new on both days, right? No, maybe because like I know like the women and the men shoot separate, and like the seniors and women's will sometimes shoot together. And
they're super shot up the second day.
Are they?
Oh my goodness, they are.
Especially with how good all the pros are. Every 12.
Yeah, the upper 12 on every target is just blown up.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing. I like to shoot all uppers because my pin goes up. I have an up pin, so I like to see. And Nathan Brooks again teaching me just little tips is not shooting at the 12, but shooting so your whole pin is inside the 10 ring, and you'll always be a 10. Doing that, unless there was a bad shot, I've never shot an 8. If my whole pin was in the 10 ring, I've never shot an 8. But again, I've shot shots where like it was holding on 12, but then I like moved like right before it shot, and it obviously was an 8. Like in the Classic, my very first target was a 5, and that was my 4th 5 of the year. But it was a 5 because I shot a 45.0 yard target right before I went to go shoot the round. And here's something that I do that I know everybody does, but I go to a whole yard number. So like it might be 37.0, it might be 45.0. And I use the Gunstar tapes. So I like it on a color that's not the orange one. So not 40 to, or actually I like it on a color that's not the green one, I think, which is 20 to 30. Because like it has ranges on your sight tape that's a different color code so that you're less likely to misset your sight. So 20, 30, 34, 40. So one of them is green, one of them is yellow, one of them is like orange. Well, I don't like setting it on yellow. So I'll go, and I don't like setting it at 20 yards because one click at 20 yards is harder to notice than one click at 50. But a lot of times though, I can notice 2 clicks at 20. So yeah, like I like it to be about 45 yards where it's white again. And then I shoot 45 or 44.0. And if I hit high or low from where I did, then I just click my sight until I'm hitting right behind my pin, and then take my indicator and then move it back to whatever my rangefinder just clicked it at 44.0. So then I know that I'm sighted in, I'm zeroed. Again, the target rifle thing, I'm zeroed at 45.0, and then move my pin to 45.0. And a lot of times though, I don't actually move it, because sometimes if you move it, now it's just not perfect how you want it. So if I feel like it would be more of a danger to move it 2 clicks on my indicator than it would be to just add 2 clicks on every single target, then
Sure.
that's what I'll do. So and like, again, with being analytical about everything, if I even have a sight tape that's not perfect, I don't need a sight tape that's perfect. As long as I know where my arrow is going to hit, I'm good.
Right.
So I'll zero it where it'll hit a 12 ring at 20, and then out to 50, I may be 6 clicks off. So then at 50, I'm sick. I take off 6 clicks. At 40, I know I take off 4, and at 30, I know I take off 2, and so like you can scale it like that, and
Sure.
that's another thing that I think I do. But yeah, like a lot of half the time I'm just adding 2 clicks on every target when I get out there, and
Holding inside the 10.
yeah, and holding inside the 10 is a big that taught me so much, because like aiming at the 12, even though I fired on the 12, it might have been a half shaft 12, or it might have been an 8, because I fired on the 12 ring, but my pin was halfway in the 12 and halfway in the 8. And I'm not necessarily aiming at the connector between the IBO and the 12 ring. I don't agree with that. I agree with aiming dead at the 12, but making sure your entire pin is inside the 10 ring. And even just aiming for, if you split the 10 ring into 4 pie pieces in the quadrants, if you just put your pin in the middle of that whole quadrant, it makes it so much easier to aim, because you're not even aiming at the 12 ring. You're aiming at that quadrant. And if you make a good shot,
Sure.
if you're a little bit low, you might be out if you're shooting at the upper. But then if you're high at all, or if you hit right where you aim, you're going to be at least a half shaft 12 and left to right.
Very
Like
nice.
12 ring, it's crazy to think about it, but 12 ring is, a lot of times it feels very big. Whenever you split up how you aim like that, it can feel tiny if you're trying to. So like if I put if I'm shooting at on an indoor range, and I take a Birchwood Casey 1-inch orange dot and put that out there and try to sight in on that, it is extremely hard to hold on that dot. But if I put a Vegas target up there, it's super easy to aim on it. So it's
because you have all
you
this.
can change aiming strategies to make it very easy. Where if you split up the 10 ring like that, I feel like aiming at that quadrant, you aim so much more relaxed and just so much easier. So I try to do that. I try to always fire on the 12, and most of the time it works really well for me.
Very nice. So where can people find you on social media?
I am on Instagram and Facebook. Facebook is just Christian Clark. And normally I don't accept requests unless there's a lot of mutual friends. So that's kind of how I'll do that. But yeah, but if you guys are listening, then Christian Clark Archer on Instagram is open to the public and it's not private. So come on there. I post everything that's on my Instagram. 90% of it goes to my Facebook as well. So they're pretty much identical. I try to keep them the same.
Very nice. Cool, man. So, dude, good luck this season. It was a pleasure to have you on. Want to try to have some more command shooters like yourself on the podcast so we can spread the virus a little bit. But yeah, anyway, do you have any parting words for the audience?
No, I just say keep working hard, guys, and keep shooting, and do what's natural for you. Whatever you feel like hits the 12 gets it done for you. And it may not work, but it may not work for me, it may not work for you, but it works for whoever it works for. So
yeah, absolutely. Just change your bow, and you should be good. So, but all right, we'll see you guys in the next one.
All right, thank you guys.